This is Tim,
And Brandon.
and this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics, sponsored by ComicsNow.com. I'm with Brandon this week. He is in New Jersey, and I'm in Japan. How's everything on that side of the world?
Same as it's ever been.
Okay. And we got a couple of books to talk about this time. First up is League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Black Dossier by Alan Moore and Kevin O'Neill. Comics Now was nice enough to provide the hardcover version for us. You got the hardcover too, right?
I did, yes.
Yeah. This is a very elaborate book. It has different paper stocks within the same book and some differently sized pages and 3D with glasses included in the back. And I don't know. For me, the first word that comes to mind to describe the experience of reading this book is exhausting.
Yes.
Because, well, for one thing, much of it is not comics. There's a sort of a framing story, which is standard comics, just like the other two League books. But then they are going through this Black Dossier they've obtained from British intelligence that shows what British intelligence knows about the League and how it's existed in various forms through history. And there's a lot of just prose. And boy, Angie, where do I even start? The Black Dossier contains many different forms of writing, and in getting ready to do this podcast, I looked around the net at a lot of other reviews of this book, and they're quite mixed. Some love it, some hate it, some are some of the best reviews point out the good parts and the bad parts. But several were saying that Moore just seems to be trying to impress us with all of the different sort of styles that he can imitate. And sometimes it gets to the point where you kind of wonder what the point is, because there isn't much of a story here. It's mostly just an exercise in imitating other styles and sticking in as many pop culture references from the late 19th, early 20th centuries as anyone possibly could, many of which most people won't recognize. I don't know. Go ahead.
Isn't that what he did with the last two books, too?
Maybe, but I mean, he turned it to 11 on this one. Because it seems like it's gone much more that way at the expense of having really any story to tell. Whereas in the first two, I mean, there was... Well, I remember that you didn't like the second one very much, and I could understand your point that the League's existence is almost trivial. I mean, because they don't do very much in the face of the Martian invasion. Right. But at least there was a story there. How much effect the League had on what happened in the story is another matter, maybe. But in this, I mean, it's basically just they get the Black Dossier and they're chased and they get away. Sorry, spoiler alert. And it really, the point of it is, well, one of the best reviews I found was on Salon. Salon.com, and what their reviewer says is the premise of the whole series is that pulp fiction and popular entertainment are the ways the deepest anxieties of culture bubble up into narrative. Nemo and Mr. Hyde and the invading Martians of the War of the Worlds exemplified Victorian England's fears about science, empire, and foreigners. And I thought that was a valid point. It's just that I'm not sure that one point is worth putting this much work into.
Well, I think there's kind of it seemed to me like there was kind of another purpose, or another two purposes.
Okay.
One of them being that, as any film director nowadays does, that he was trying to put our perception of our pop culture heroes kind of on its head.
Mm-hmm.
I guess another spoiler: James Bond is in this,
mm-hmm.
and the way he writes James Bond is very much the way that I felt when I watched the early movies recently.
The Sean Connery ones?
Sean Connery, yeah. So you watch it, and the guy's pretty much like a serial rapist and majoring in sexual harassment. So he goes definitely a step further with that character. But that was the first thing I noticed. But I also noticed that it seems like with some of his other books, Alan Moore is really doing some kind of a harsh commentary on the English government.
Yeah, well, I know that was a big part of V for Vendetta.
Right. And probably The Watchmen a little bit too, right?
I imagine so. Yeah, I mean that he was doing that kind of within the confines of doing a DC book, so maybe well, and that was earlier in his career as well. I think as he gets older, he gets more cantankerous.
But the way that he approached this book, I think we saw the start of that with The Watchmen.
Mm-hmm.
Because they had the little newspaper clippings. They were a page to 2 pages long, maybe 4 pages in each chapter of The Watchmen.
Yeah, well, he's always been kind of like mixing other forms of media, kind of, or other forms of writing into the comics. But yeah, he really pulls out all the stops on that approach in this book.
Right. So did you like it or not?
Boy, that's not an easy question to answer. I think the regular comics parts I enjoyed. The rest of it, the actual Black Dossier contents, were kind of hit and miss.
Yeah.
Some I liked, and sometimes just because of the sometimes incomprehensible writing style of some of these, like the looking at these reviews on the net, I was able to find out what a lot of these things were meant to be because I didn't recognize the references. But there's one that's meant to be like a Jack Kerouac type of story. The Crazy Wide Forever. It's credited to Sal Paradise. And it is extremely hard to read. It's just in this sort of stream of consciousness, drugged out style. And about halfway through, you start to kind of pick out a story that involves the League. So, and if you read it really carefully, you can sort of understand what the point of that part of the book is. And something that really bugged me as someone who does page layout for a living, anytime that it was a predominantly text section, the margins were way too small, and it's all that text crammed on the page is really hard to read and just kind of overwhelming.
Right.
And I don't know. Go ahead.
I think the switch is pretty hard for a person who's expecting to read through a comic book. It's not any larger than any average graphic novel, but it certainly takes 10 times as long to read.
Yes,
this.
I would say so.
I think.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, yeah. I mean, if if you pick this up and say, okay, this is a comic, and at this thickness I can read it through in this amount of time, you're wrong. Because if you're going to read all the text sections, it's going to take you quite a bit longer. And so, like I say, a lot of the text sections don't read so easily because they're written in various like older styles of writing or whatever. There's the Shakespearean section and so forth. So they take a lot of concentration to try to get the meaning out of them.
And I think when I was looking at this book, it's difficult for a comic book reader to look at it because they're expecting a comic book.
Mm-hmm.
And then they get a whole lot of prose mixed in with it. Mm-hmm. At least, I don't know. What percentage of the book do you think is prose?
Oh,
half?
Half, at least.
And I think it's pretty tough for me as a comic book reader to look at this and go, holy crap, I'm expecting to get through a page, and I'm not going to be able to do it within the next 10 minutes. Usually you read a page in, less than a minute?
Yeah.
And then you sit here reading a page for 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The expectation of how the pacing and I don't know. I'm a busy guy, so I don't have very much time
mm-hmm.
to read. If I'm going to sit down and read a book, at least I know what to expect, right? Maybe I'll get 3 pages out of the way or whatever I have at that slotted period of time. Mm-hmm. And then I sit down with this book having that same kind of expectation. I think if it were the reverse, it would probably work better. If I was to sit down expecting this to be a regular novel.
And then part of it's comics and it zips by. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it would be like a welcome change every once in a while to be reading a novel and then go, oh, hey, they have a comic book in here. That's kind of cool. Where in the reverse,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm reading the comic book and I'm going, another page of prose.
There's a lot of sex in this book, and sometimes it was hard for me to really understand if there was any point to it besides just being titillating.
I know the one time they have sex after reading the Fanny Hill diary or whatever.
Uh-huh.
It...
But I mean, like especially the dossier contents themselves. Within the comic, yeah, there's some sex, but in the dossier, especially the first part, like the first half of the book, like almost everything that they go through in the dossier has all kinds of screwing in it. And I don't know if he's just got a one-track mind or if he had some real purpose in doing it that way. I don't know. But yeah, my expectation when I first heard about this book that it was coming out was that it would be like some comics about the League in different eras. And it's not nearly that straightforward, except in one or two places. There's one section, and I just happened to open the book to it. It talks about the Warlson team, 1946-47, which it's not exactly a comic, but it's a couple pages that introduces who those people were, and it's much more straightforward in terms of. And it kind of gave me a taste of what I kind of wanted out of this book and didn't really get for the most part. And one of the reviewers on Amazon criticized this book because they felt like it was too much showing, or not too much telling and not enough showing. Yeah. Just like this is what happened, and it in this sort of cold narrative style that's supposed to be what British intelligence has gathered. There's no tension to the story, no real adventure to any of these, past incarnations of the League. So, it just kind of A happened, B happened, C happened.
Right.
So, as a story, as stories, they don't really pay off in the way that you might want them to. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm interested in hearing what Mulela's opinion of this book was, because that was in one of the podcasts. That was his major point, was that instead of telling, you show, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I know how much he loves Alan Moore, so I'm wondering if there would be a contradiction there.
I don't know that he's read it, but maybe I should loan this to him now that I'm finished with it. Although when I loan him books, it usually takes quite a while to get them back. But
I'm not going to say anything.
So, did you like it? Did you like this?
Parts of it parts of it was entertaining, but
yeah,
I found
it's not easy to answer.
I found it more entertaining than the second one, but not as good as the first one.
Ah, okay.
I know a lot of people that I watch G4 TV. You ever seen that
No.
channel?
No.
Well, they have a couple of different shows, one of them being Attack of the Show. And what Attack of the Show does is it covers a lot of the videos and the things you can find on the net besides porn.
Mm-hmm.
They say like the internet is made up of 97% porn. So let's look at the other 3%. So they have that section where they're dealing kind of with technology, and then they have like a little gadget show, and they also have a girl that comes on. She does reviews of comic books, and she said that this was kind of the ultimate Alan Moore book. And I can see how this could be like kind of the ultimate expression of what he thinks comic books should be.
Mm-hmm.
So I can appreciate the work that he put into it. It's obviously, a whole lot of work.
Yeah, and it was delayed quite a bit from the original schedule.
I could take it or leave it, really. I know it's sacrilegious to say, but
I'd much rather read Top 10 again.
Oh yeah, I don't know. There's been a couple Alan Moore books that I really like, but for the most part, they all seem very, very hard to read. They're a whole lot of work, and typically I appreciate like intellectual stimulus from a book, but I don't feel a whole lot of emotional attachment to his books anymore. So the emotional side, for me, is missing when I read an Alan Moore book. Sure, there's certainly the sexual side nowadays.
Yeah.
But in order to keep me hooked into the characters, you have to really make me feel connected to them. And he doesn't typically do that anymore for me. He didn't do it in this book, even though I already knew who the characters were. Even the characters that weren't the main characters, we knew who they were. I just didn't feel attached, unlike some of the other books that were sent to me. The Paul Has a Summer Job and Scott Pilgrim. Those are the books that we'll talk about later.
Yeah. Yeah, Paul I haven't read yet, but
well, I can say for a lot of the independent books that we've been looking at, or what's the major publisher that we always look at now?
Top Shelf.
Top Shelf. A lot of those have much more emotional content than the Black Dossier, and typically less challenging intellectually. Sometimes it's pretty good, but if I had my choice of which way to go heavy in a book, it would probably be emotionally. And I think that's true in almost any medium. I would say with film too, it's the same thing. I think that's also probably why Here It Comes. I didn't really like the new Star Wars trilogy. It's because I didn't really connect with the characters so much.
Yeah.
Except for Darth Maul, and they killed him. So. But the original three, that was the strength.
Oh yeah, Luke and Leia and Han, yeah.
And they seem to be going through things, even though they're, a galaxy away or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They were going through the same kind of human issues that we all were going through.
Mm-hmm.
Or in the new three, not so much. That's kind of the same way that I feel about the Black Dossier is. There's so many other books out there that really connect. You can connect with the characters,
Mm-hmm.
and this is kind of like the new three. You know, every once in a while you get something that's really entertaining, but for the most part, if you're to look at the story and the characters, their development throughout the story, it's really not much of a journey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I had to tie it back into Star Wars. I figured, for old time's
Yeah,
sake.
sure, exactly. I mean, what else is this podcast other than an excuse to talk about Star Wars?
Exactly.
By the way, I'm not sure if you knew that Alan Moore in all his future projects are supposed to come from Top Shelf.
Is that right?
Yeah, because he was doing this ABC America's Best Comics. Can't talk. America's Best Comics imprint, but now DC owns it, and he doesn't want to work for DC anymore. So he's abandoning ABC and being published by Top Shelf.
I thought he built ABC.
I think he did. I think it was together with Wildstorm or something, but then DC bought Wildstorm, and I don't know.
Yeah, I saw Jim Lee's name somewhere.
Oh yeah, that subway map thing at the beginning.
Right.
And yeah, just under that it says ABC closed for the duration.
Is that like a little hint?
Yeah, I think so. That one of the reviews I found mentions that. But there's supposed to be a regular. This is not actually supposed to be League Volume 3. This is sort of 2.5. But there's a League Volume 3 that's supposed to come out from Top Shelf probably in a couple of years. They're saying '09, but it'll probably be later than that.
I was looking at this map. I was more entertained by the map than by the rest of the book. Because it really seems kind of, clever, the stops they have along each member's path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's supposed to look like a London Underground map, and there are different lines, and there's an Alan Moore line and a Kevin O'Neill line, and a line for other people involved in the book, and then stations along the way, I guess, referring to maybe things about the person.
Yeah, like with Alan Moore, if he was to go off on the west,
mm-hmm.
the western line,
mm-hmm.
he would go past the rumor mill to the West Buttock. Derision? Is that how you say that?
Yeah, derision.
And much gloating.
Okay. Anyway, so
Yes.
Sort of mixed review of Black Dossier. What kind of ranking would you give it? Rating?
Don't do this to me. He's gonna hate me.
Yeah, I mean,
because he's like one of the original gods of comics, right?
Alan Moore.
Yeah, maybe not one of the original, but one of the modern gods of comics.
Like Swamp Thing and Watchmen, and
I give it a 5.
Yeah, that's what I'm leaning towards too. I mean, there's some stuff in there that I might give a 9 or 10, and other parts that I'd rank a lot lower. So it kind of averages out to a 5. Okay, next we have
what's a more interesting,
reasonably
subject?
new kind of mini book from Alex Robinson called Lower Regions, published, of course, by Top Shelf. And this is a little project that he just did to take a break from the new graphic novel Too Cool to Be Forgotten that's supposed to come out in July. And it's a totally different kind of story for him. It's just running around, a babe running around in caves fighting monsters. No dialogue, and lots of monsters and violence and stuff like that. definitely a departure for him, I guess, but it was enjoyable. What did
Yeah, it
you
was
think
fun
of
to
it?
read.
Yeah.
It was fun to read. And it was humorous and funny, you know.
Mm-hmm. And, well, kind of a twist ending to it.
It was, unlike the Black Dossier, a pretty quick read.
Yeah, well, gee, it's just, what, like 30, 40 pages, no dialogue, certainly no pages full of prose. So, yeah, you can just sit down and read it in a few minutes.
There was dialogue, by the way. It's in a foreign language.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry,
It's
I
not
forgot
even-
about that.
It doesn't even qualify as a foreign language. It's an imaginary language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just like looks like runes or something.
Right. Took me a little while to figure that out, but no, I didn't read it. I'm sorry.
You had to pull out your rune English dictionary and figure out what he was saying.
So is it like a parody of Red Sonja and Conan kind of thing, you think? Or just in that genre?
I'm not sure if it's a parody or an homage. Sort of somewhere in between.
Right. It reminds me of when I was growing up and I used to play that video game, Gauntlet.
Hmm.
You probably never played it.
I don't. You're younger than I am. I think that I may have been in Japan by that time.
It was in the early 80s, I
Really?
think.
Early 80s?
Yeah.
Gauntlet. Gee, I don't remember Gauntlet.
Maybe mid 80s would be better.
Okay.
Yeah, it was the first like 4-player arcade game.
Okay.
So you had these little tiny characters that were you had the choice of a warrior who had an axe,
Mm-hmm.
an elf I think who had a bow and arrow, a wizard, and I don't remember the fourth character. It was a female. She was a Valkyrie. That's what she was. So you just go around killing stuff in this dungeon.
Mm-hmm.
Good memories, good times.
Yeah. So, what would you rank lower regions?
7? 8?
Yeah. Maybe 7. I'm not sure.
I just decided it had to be higher than the Black Dossier to add.
Yeah. Oh, guess what? I finished reading The Black Diamond.
You did?
Yeah. Well, it took a while because I ordered the last 4 issues kind of late, and Comics Now had a little trouble getting them for me. But
Because they were sold out.
oh yeah, they're flying off the shelves, I'm sure. So I read the last 4 issues, total 6-issue miniseries. Which
Is this going in the podcast?
yeah.
Because I know the writer listens, right?
Or he did that time anyway. I don't know if he's going to listen this time. Written by Larry Young, who is also the guy running the publisher, AIT Planet Lar.
And he's the guy that wrote Astronauts in Trouble, is that right?
I think so. I haven't read that, but I think he wrote that also. Yeah, and you said that was fairly good, didn't you?
Yeah, it was okay.
I don't know. This, in case listeners didn't hear our earlier podcast on the Black Diamond, it's about this elevated highway that was built to be a ghetto, basically. And we had a lot of problems with the whole concept and everything, and also the art, and also the writing and other things. The staples are okay. We gave a good review to the staples. They hold the book together quite well. But there's not much more to say about the last 4 issues that we didn't say about the first 2 issues, except finally in issue 3 we get a little action. I mean, it actually starts to at least try to be exciting. And the ending was strange, because for no reason that I could discern,
It was in 3D.
No.
Oh, sorry.
We suddenly start to get these narration boxes that contain the script. And in some cases, well, some of it is just description, and then in some cases it's the lines, and in some cases we see those lines in the comic in word balloons, and then on the next page we see them in narration boxes in the script.
Hmm.
And I really couldn't understand why he did that. It's just a bizarre ending to a bizarre comic, I guess. And I didn't really get it, but
I haven't seen it. I have no opinion, I guess.
Anyway, just sort of following up on our previous review of that book. So, did you have anything to say about the Grendel Archives?
Only that I guess it would be kind of like Star Wars. how if you go back to the original, how it was originally cut and everything, you can appreciate how far we've come with the story, with the character, and definitely with the art since the very start of the series. Because Grendel is this huge phenomenon, I think, that has had many different generations, even because in the story they take on the whole kind of like the persona of Grendel. And the first one, the thing that I liked about the Grendel Archives was that it really played out that whole who's the hero, who's the villain kind of dynamic between the two main characters in this. And even though the art was very primitive for, I think, who did the artwork? Mike, I want to say Warner. That's not his name, though.
Matt Wagner?
Matt Wagner.
The writer and artist, right?
Right. So even though he's come a long way in his artwork, still the story was readable, and the dynamic behind it was so very entertaining, I thought. It's certainly not up to the par that he would create today. But.
Now, I'm not familiar with Grendel at all, other than having read this book. I was engaged in the story. I wanted to see what happened. The art feels like reasonably good high school student art. And maybe that's about what it is. I don't know how old he was when he did this.
Right.
But yeah, in terms of the story, it worked for me.
And it was kind of it came out at the time of, not really the birth of independent comics, but how independent comics started to hit the mainstream in the 80s. Because people were starting to move away from Marvel and DC.
Yeah, I don't know who originally published it. This hardcover is from Dark Horse.
I remember Comico had Grendel for a while. I don't know if they had it in the original series. Do you know Comico? The comic book
I remember hearing about them in the 80s, yeah.
Yeah, they used to. I think the thing that I was most familiar with them was Robotech. They did a Robotech series back when the cartoon was very popular.
Okay, yeah, that kind of rings a bell. But yeah, early 80s, I remember starting to know about these other companies that were starting up, like First Comics and Capital, and some of those.
I think this was before First. According to, and you can discount it if you want, Wikipedia, Comico, the comic company, was an American comic book company headquartered in Norristown, Pennsylvania. Its best-known comics include Robotech adaptations and Matt Wagner's Mage the Hero, Discovered, and Grendel. Once considered a major contender in the American market, it went to bankruptcy in 1990, although it continued sporadically to publish books until 1997. It was one of it was owned by the artist, a group of artists and publishers who had previously printed in a local school paper called Duckwork in 1982.
Okay. Yeah, and the copyright on the front of this are 82, 83, and 84, and then 2007 when the book came out, the collection.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, but yeah, I think for a good comic read, I would recommend this over Black Dossier.
Really? Just twist the knife in. And the reason why we're doing this is we're trying to get Alan Moore to call us, right?
Yeah, there you go. Anybody we criticize contacts us. So, yeah, who needs Alan Moore? But if he comes on the podcast, sure, then we'll love him. I forgot to mention that one problem with the Black Diamond was that it started out slow. It took till issue 3 to really get moving. So, I meant to say, I thought it could have benefited from using an action scene from the middle of the story as its opening scene. It's a bit of a tired old formula, but it would have been an improvement in this case. I wanted to mention also that now we're in May, and this month's Diamond Previews will be soliciting books by some people that we've talked to on the podcast recently. Alex Robinson's Too Cool to Be Forgotten will be solicited, and also The Martian Confederacy, written by Jason McNamara, drawn by Paige Braddock, and colored by Brian Miller of Hi-Fi Studios. And all of them, of course, have been on the podcast since the beginning of the year. So be sure to pick up Diamond Previews and order those books from your comic supplier. I should say that Too Cool to Be Forgotten is from Top Shelf Productions, and Martian Confederacy is from Girl Twirl Comics. If you get them from comicsnow.com, you can get 30% off the cover price. If you subscribe to any comic series, Marvel or DC or Indies, any monthly comic subscriptions, you can get 35% off anything you order, including these graphic novels. For more information, contact Comics Now through the contact page at comicsnow.com. Many of the comics we review on this podcast are supplied by comicsnow.com, and they also provide Eric's newsletter, featured on our site, globalcomics.net. Our theme song is performed by Firewater. Let us give you some feedback on your comic. Send it to us at podcast@globalcomics.net, and we'll review it on the show. Also, if you'd like to send us a donation to help keep the show going, use the PayPal link on the podcast page at globalcomics.net. Next week, Kumar will be back, and we'll be talking about Osamu Tezuka's Ode to Kirihito. It's a big, thick graphic novel. Till then, thanks for listening. This is Tim. See you next week on Deconstructing Comics.